All right, welcome. It's May the 4th, Star Wars Day. Yay! All exciting stuff. So, may the 4th of change be with us today as I go through our change manifesto with folks. And actually, I'm not going to go through every single detail of our change manifesto in one go. Today's session is really about having an overview of what's going on with the change manifesto and give a bit of background to why we've done this. And, folks that maybe are catching up with us on our YouTube channel afterwards or watching the recording back can use this a bit of a reference guide to what we've been doing on the 4TC mindset, the for the change push to become thought leaders in this change space. So what are we doing? What are we talking about today? Well, what we're talking about today is the activity around creating a mindset, an ethos, a shift in the way that you think about change to focus on having that underlying cultural fit in terms of understanding core principles that we've come up with for change enablement to take place within individuals, within small groups, within huge, large organizations. Doesn't matter who it is. It's all the same principles. So I'm going to guide you through our 10 principles that we've created for the Change Manifesto. I'm going to give you some general overviews on each one of these. And beyond that, I'm going to put out an open invite. That open invite is for comments and questions at the end of this piece, but also an open invite for you to maybe put some things out on your social media that suggests whether you agree or disagree with some of these things and why. Maybe the question is, can you see these working for yourself in a change space? If you were somebody on the receiving end of getting change with these principles, would you be happy with this stuff? Would this be something that works for you? And then there'll be future invitations to come back and join me again, because I'm going to be doing a few more of these conversations, doing deeper dives and digging into the core content behind these things and giving a much more sort of practical relationship to what each of these core principles can do for anybody in change and how we intend to help others through change using them. So let's jump in and start talking about these principles because, that's kind of why you're here. That's what you want to hear about. Enough of me just filling space for the moment in time. So let's get moving on to the principles. And let's start with number one. And, number one, I'm not saying this is any priority level, but, kind of is really important. Number one says that change needs a purpose, a cause, a goal, and need to happen. Change for change's sake will always fail. So what we're sharing here is the fact that if you're going to have a change taking place, it's got to have an end point. It's got to have a purpose to why it's happening. There's no point in sitting back and just going, well, we'd like a change, so let's change the way we're doing things now, but we don't really know where we want to go to, how we want to develop this, or where we want to get to. So what we want to do is make sure that any change has a very clear goal, purpose, and opportunity for people to see why it's happening. One of my big things and one of the key things that we've been adamant about explaining to people as they go through change is that any change that doesn't have that why being answered about the change is really just because somebody wants to do something for the sake of doing it. It's not really got purpose. That's what we mean by change for change's sake. It's a change that doesn't have a clear purpose. Somebody's just doing it because they just want to be different. Or maybe they want to stroke their own personal ego at times. Maybe they want to go out there and do something that maybe they think will make themselves a mark and noticeable and, fake it till you make it, maybe one of their programs. But we don't believe in any of that stuff. What we believe in, and our first and foremost principle, is that if you could undertake any change journey, it has to have a purpose and a point to get to. And that's what we do. So that's number one, starting off. Let's move to number two. And this is where we say change is more successful when the activity is done with the people experiencing the change. What do we mean by this? Okay. Change in isolation, change that's done to people, is never going to succeed. Change needs to be a collaborative process to be successful. Without going into too much of sort of neuroscience and psychology behind this, when a change is needed, when a change is required, when we need to move something forward from where it was to where it needs to be, picking up on that first principle, the idea that we have a purpose and an end goal, then to go along that journey, we have to recognize that we can't do it alone. We need people around us, and we also need to work with people who are experiencing that change. And probably the most important word in this whole principle is the word with. It's a very small word, but it's probably the most important, because when people feel that they are part of the change, when they feel that they are having an experience of change with themselves and with those that are guiding and supporting them, then they actually make a psychological contract with themselves. They make that connectivity to the change, and that connectivity to the change is going to help people to actually engage, support, and move into a more positive space for the change. They feel like their voice is being heard in the change. They feel like they are being understood, and that their whole experience is something that can be relatable to themselves, because, hey, not only is this change being done with them, it's now kind of their change as well. So that's number 2. Number 3, an interesting one for us, a little bit of a thinky piece here. But change is defined not by the end state, but the journey to get there. The end state is just the result of successful change. So this is kind of a descriptive piece, a language piece that's very important. When you're explaining a change, it's very easy for us to say, oh, this change is to implement X, to deliver Y, whatever it may be. But what we have to recognize is the implementation is not the change. The actual change is the journey that's leaving the old way of doing things and moving to the point where this is implemented. And that's where the support mechanisms need to be done. Now, a change journey can be made of multiple elements and sequences of change. If we think from a somewhat agile mindset, we might think about, different sprint periods that are moving a change along in incremental nudges or such like. But what we have to recognize is change is that journey to get to the end point. The end point we've defined as principle 1. And we need to be very, very careful of just talking about change in terms of its end point, its result, its goal at the end, because that may not even happen if the change isn't done successfully. So we need to have successful change to get to that desired effect from the activity that we're working on. 3 down. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're focused. Remember, if you've got any queries or questions on this stuff, I'll pick up on it and try and answer some stuff. And hopefully you can also socialize and comment on some of this stuff. And we'll make sure there's plenty of stuff. If you follow our LinkedIn pages, all of that stuff as well. So number 4, change happens when you successfully manage change tasks and offer change management support to the people experiencing the change. This is an interesting one, because what we've recognized, and one of the principles that we brought this to the fore and quite high up on our list, is that with many years of experience delivering change ourselves within the team, we recognize that there are kind of 2 balancing pieces that need to happen for a change to be delivered successfully, for that journey to go through successfully. We have to manage the tasks that are required, the things that need to be done along the way. But we also need to support the people that are experiencing that journey so that they can actually cope with it well, they can actually navigate it well, and look at what's required and expected from them. So when we want a change to happen, we can't just focus on a task mindset. We have to focus on both the task and people mindset. And that task and people mindset is how we are going to not just make the change happen, but also get people to engage with the change in such a way that their engagement successfully delivers or adopts or uses, or whatever other words you want to play along with at that point in time, whatever it is that you're changing, whatever maybe that endpoint is that you're going towards. So we do want to be very clear that we believe that when we're supporting and guiding people through change, we're also balancing that with the need to manage task activity to deliver whatever it is. Maybe a new piece of software, maybe a new organizational structure, maybe it's just a new mindset, a new cultural focus. So we focus on change happening when doing these things together within Principle 4. So our number 5 principle is a little bit lengthy, but it has some real reasoning behind it. I'll read it out first and then I'll split it up and dissect into its elements. So number 5 says, it doesn't matter what theories, models, or methodologies you use. You must have a series of activities to move from where you were to where you need to be in a transparent and supportive manner for those affected, relevant to the circumstances of the change. So let me unpack this into a few key component pieces of this principle. The first element, it doesn't matter what theories, models, or methodologies you use. We are strong advocates of recognizing multiple methodologies, approaches, models, etc., that are out there that people may have preferences for using. We don't believe that one model is one size fits all for everything. We believe that you need to modify and reflect upon any model or approach that you take to reflect upon the circumstance of the change that you're working with. So looping that to the very last sentence bit, relevant to the circumstance of the change, that's where we start to connect these two pieces together on this principle. We're recognizing that change happens using any one of a whole range of approaches, but you need to make sure that approach is maybe shaped or defined to reflect the change that you're working on. And that approach is going to include a series of activities that need to take place. Those activities will talk to things like, the task stuff that the last principle was mentioning, as well as the people stuff the last principle was mentioning. It may be some documentation that's required to give people some information on how things are being navigated. But all of this stuff that you're doing, all of this activity, however you connect it together, is going to be focused on the change that is actually happening, not just a template transformation based on a standard change approach without recognizing the individuality of the circumstances. And for people to recognize that you're experiencing this change, we will make sure that it's totally transparent. We're not going to have anything hidden from people. We want people to understand the journey they're going to take and how it's going to affect them and what it means to them. And we also want to be clear that we are doing so in a supportive manner. We're not there to do things in a judging. We're not there to do things and say, no, that's wrong, that's right. We're accepting that, variability of people, variability of circumstances mean that we're going to be working with a variability of situations and have to flex and bend, demonstrate being agile in our approach to actually make this happen. So these are the first 5 principles that I've covered off so far, halfway through the conversation today. They do get a little bit deeper, and as you can see, some of them have got a few more words coming up here. But I will keep moving forward and keep on talking to each one of these principles. So number 6, this is where we talk about stakeholders and recognizing the experience stakeholders have and how important they are to any change success. So what do we say here? Stakeholders' responses to change can range from enthusiasm to resistance and all points in between. Their response will vary throughout the experience and can move along that continuum. This is something that's very important for us to recognize, and I think important for anybody looking at change to recognize. The fact is that stakeholders will have varying responses at various points through the change experience, and that different stakeholders will have different responses. And those responses can vary from absolutely so enthusiastic, this is the best thing ever possibly could happen, I'm so pleased, right the way through to total resistance of, I hate it, I don't like it, this is horrible, I'm not comfortable with this in any shape or form. And some stakeholders will have varying degrees in between. So you might not have somebody who's enthusiastic so much that they are, shouting hallelujah, but they might be kind of going, oh, that's quite nice. I quite like that. That's good. That's very good. That's so good. I'm really happy about it. And you can see how that progresses along that piece. And then similarly, you can look at people who might go, oh my, I'm really not comfortable with this. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Or maybe go to, I don't like that, I can't see how it can work. Or that's not nice, I'm not liking the way this is going. Or no, I can't get my head around this. I can't connect with this. This doesn't work for me. Right the way through to total resistance of like, this is just, I've got to try and stop this happening because I'm so uncomfortable. And that continuum of thoughts is not one and done at the beginning of any change experience. That's going to move throughout the journey of the change as we go through those activities, supporting the people and managing the tasks. And what we have through this journey is a recognition that the success of our activities is going to be reflected in how those emotional response mechanisms move. We'd like to think that good change enablement, good change practices, good support mechanisms are going to move people from that very negative resistant state towards the positive state. But it may not happen in one go. It may happen slowly over time. And we may have to have multiple engagements with them to actually move them from where they currently are to where we need them to be. And as such, we need to work and recognize that it's not going to be a switch that's flicked like the snap of your fingers from a stakeholder going no to yes. But we may have to recognize that there are going to be multiple steps along the way that we have to support the stakeholders. And in the same token, as an additional piece to this conversation about stakeholders, we also recognize that because they can range across this space, there may be some stakeholders that are actually in a good space to begin with, that we want to stay there. And we need to invest our time and effort in keeping them there. Because if we go, oh, you're good, and then ignore them, they may feel that ignorance, they may feel rejected, and they may drift from a positive to a more negative stance on a change. And that can be really, really destructive. So when we are doing stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder responsiveness, we have to recognize that this is about managing fluidity of mindset, fluidity of responses. And it's not a one and done, stuck for the rest of the game. We will keep on having to do effort to keep them there or move them to where we want them to be. A lot of conversation on the stakeholder one there. But building on that one, number 7 talks about engagement. And I kind of touched on stakeholder engagement, but when we look at engagement across change as a whole, what we have to recognize is that engagement is more than just communications. It reflects interactivity, inclusive connection, and a feeling of belonging within the change. This is something that we recognize and have seen from many, many years of experience, and actually many, many years of less successful change efforts, should we say. I'm going to try to stay away from anything too negative. But overly focusing on just communicating out information isn't true engagement. That's a one-way messaging system. And if we want people to truly feel engaged with the change, we have to do proper engagement. And engagement means that people interact. There's a two-way flow of conversation. It's not just information cascading out. It's about listening to people and getting that response mechanism back and forth between them. We also have to recognize that the connection that we make with people is authentic. And that connection has to be where they value their contributions and that they feel valued in the way that their voice is being heard. And this is a way to reinforce what we were talking about earlier on, of helping people to feel that they belong within the change. Remember at the beginning, we were talking about doing change with people rather than to people. This is the same thing that we're talking about here, is that people need to feel that they belong within this change so that they can give of themselves the best that they can to making that change successful. If they don't do that, then it's not always because of the way they respond to the change. It may be a lack of true engagement by the folks that are supporting them through that change. So we have a strong principle here that says that engagement is more than just sending out comms. We want people to feel that they can interact and belong with the change by having that true, authentic connection that is recognizing of all of those voices. Number 8. All right, so training describes instructional delivery of tasks or processes and is a subset of the learning experience, which encompasses a much broader range of educational events that may be self-led or led by others. This was something that was important to us to actually flag up and put as one of our principles. When we're doing change, when people need to understand maybe a new process or a new technology or a new person that they need to be reporting into, maybe in a structure change, there's a very common default to use the training word to say, we'll train them up on this. And we need to make sure that we understand what training is versus how somebody learns about something. And training is often the go-to for educational needs within a change effort. And we want to recognize that although training may often be a very valuable and important piece of that educational journey for individuals going through change, we want to recognize that at its core, it is just about instructional delivery of something like a process or a practice or a documentation or some other action that is going to be done over and over again until somebody can repeat it back at them. It's that kind of experience of education through instruction. Yet for many change efforts, and particularly when you look at organizations that are aspiring to go through cultural transformations, aspiring to go through organizational redesigns, organizations that are just trying to move a mindset, maybe it's part of a value shift, etc., that those elements that are new to the organization can't be just trained on for people. They have to look beyond the training practice, beyond the training course, to look at other educational events that come within the whole learning experience to help those individuals move to where they need to be. And those learning experiences can include a whole range of things. We can be looking at self-led activities like online e-learning, watching videos online, even down to reading a book or watching a television type program, etc. It could be anything that can be self-led. It could be led by others in a way that's not a training. It could be more of a workshop, a facilitated workshop to understand and unpack something. It could even be a sandbox play space for somebody to just trial and error something out and see what happens. These are all learning opportunities. And there's many more that I could probably go into if we had the time, that you can probably all think about as well, in terms of your experiences in being educated. It's not all about the training course. Okay, just 2 more to go. So number 9, on our top 10, our fantastic 10 principles for change enablement. Number 9, leadership is a behavior, not a title. And the better quality the leadership demonstrated, the more successful and supported the change will be. So there's a couple of pieces to unpack in this principle. First and foremost, leadership is a behavior, not a title. Far too many times conversations happen with leaders who are more concerned with their title than actually the behaviors they demonstrate. When we go into a change experience, we need to have leadership, executive leadership, senior leadership support for those changes. There needs to be that sponsorship of the change effort. That needs to come from individuals who can truly demonstrate leadership behaviors, qualities that inspire people, qualities that encourage others to move forward, qualities that are enabling the success of those people to realize their full potential. True leaders that demonstrate leadership are people that other people want to follow for good reason. Now, when we're looking at how to make change successful, we need to have this leadership behavior present, because by the same token, that leadership behavior is also what's needed to encourage, engage, support, help individuals experiencing the change to successfully navigate it. So that when we talk about our role enabling change to take place, we will be bringing in leadership behaviors at the same time as bringing in task-based behaviors, as bringing in general individual guidance principles. Those leadership behaviors we expect to see replicated within the organizations. And if they're not, then we have to maybe do some work to help those individuals who are not demonstrating true leadership behaviors to get an understanding about what's expected. Gone are the days of leaders in organizations being about command and control. They are not dictators. They are not going to be all about telling people what to do. They need to be focused on enabling and engaging, empowering, all those fancy E words to help people move forward with the change and to help those individuals to support the change going forward through that true engagement. Because looping back to the last couple of principles, this one also wraps up the whole engagement focus, because true leaders know how to engage with people. Leadership is engagement. Leadership is successfully engaging people to deliver change. So that was number 9. And now the finale, number 10. The 10th principle. Change should always deliver a benefit as defined by the currency of the situation. So this almost goes full circle to our 10 principles. And I kind of like the idea of it going full circle, because I think there is a kind of cyclic mindset to all of these principles. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once I finish number 10 here. But when we look at change, change has to have a purpose and a reason. Quite often that purpose or reason has to be a benefit. And the benefit will be something that's realized more of, or something that's avoiding a negative impact, or some other sort of range of things that will be clearly achieved once the change is successfully being delivered. So to give some examples of this, the most common one would be some sort of, return of investment in terms of the currency, the money that's been invested in something. We say a benefit is going to be, we're going to spend $1 million and we're going to get $5 million back. That's a return of investment, a very clear metric number crunching piece. But we may also look at this and say, hey, the change we're doing is about a cultural transformation. We're shifting the culture forward to a different way. So our benefits are not necessarily those metrics of money, but maybe are more about seeing people engaging and adopting and moving forward with a mindset that we want to see, a mindset that we want to expect from the actual changed culture. So the success and the benefit of the change can be seen by that. We could even look at benefit as being a cost avoidance or a criminal avoidance, even in some cases, where we have to make a change because of something regulatory or legislative that's been imposed by the government of the day or some other sort of controlling body, professional body, etc., that oversees the delivery of what you do. And that is where we recognize that maybe the benefit is not having to pay the fine. The benefit is avoiding incurring, 60 days of whatever. I may be saying that a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's real. We have to think about all of these different things. So whenever we do a change, we should be able to define that change by the currency of the situation. And that may take a little bit of time. And I would say one other thing to add to this is that you should be able to define this at the outset of the change, not along the way, because that in itself will go somewhere towards that goal, that purpose that we said in the very first principle. So that's all 10 principles I've gone through today with you as a very, overarching piece. I haven't drilled down into huge amounts of detail on each of these principles because the plan, I intend to have some deeper dive conversation on some of the kind of connected pieces within these principles. But we do believe that all 10 of these principles are connected and intertwined together. That, whether you look at them as a checklist of mindset moments, or whether you look at them as a cycle of considerations for any change to take place, we don't actually mind which of those you think about. But what we are saying is that from us as an organization, for the change, 4TC as we usually refer to ourselves, our mindset is about recognizing that there are core principles that when they are part of any change effort would be showing that we are self-fulfilling, self-leading, self-satisfying, I suppose, for our change folks and the folks experiencing the change that we work with. We are looking, as we expand and as we develop and engage with future clients, that these 10 principles will be part of every engagement that we do. We expect this to be part of the understanding of the engagement that we do with anybody going forward. And, whether we are directly engaging with folks, working through other parties, however that engagement is, these principles are going to be underpinning the way that we do that engagement. So at this point in time, I'm going to pause and I'm going to see if anybody has any questions, comments, or revelations from what I've just talked through. Any aha moments might have come in as well. And open up the space to anybody who's on the call, either through Zoom or if any questions come through. We're actually streaming this live on YouTube as well at the same time. There might be some comments that will come through there as well. Whatever comes through, however it comes through, we'll find a way to respond to it. But I open myself up to the floor now for any questions or comments. Feel free to either type them in the chat box, or you can do the brave thing and unmute yourself and talk to me. I also do that conversation as well. Thank you. Everybody's quiet now. Everybody's thinking. I've hit them with so many things. They're all going, oof, okay, my brain needs to process all of this stuff.
If no one goes forward, I may have something reach. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, sure,
Great.
go for it.
So Nico, I work at GSK Vaccines on culture transformation. Just wanted to react. So thanks for sharing this. Those are like a bunch of principles that I think all of us who've been in change management will have been aware, but it's nice to have this like summary and overview of all of them. There was one thing that I just wanted to challenge you back a little bit, is your principle number 4. Because it was saying change happens when. You may want to go back to it, I don't know. Change happen when, and then you talked about change tasks and offering support. And in my experience, these are important things to do, but not going to be enough for change to happen. And I guess in a way, the 9 other principles are another expression of that. I would rather have said, when change happens, then we notice that you have successfully managed tasks and that you have offered support to people. Because it's not going to be enough. You're going to have to do other things than that for change to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I think to a certain extent, you know, the rest of the principles kind of build out on that. I think the key important thing here is almost like the and word, which is why it's in bold, because one of the poor delivery experiences is when people only focus on the task side of things and they don't include the people side of things. And that's what this principle was trying to get at, is as much as you can't just make change because you process the tasks to make change happen. You have to engage the people along the way at the same time. And it's making sure that that comes together at the same time. So that's where this was coming from. And, you know, there's kind of a broader description that would sit underneath this, so that we have within the sort of publication that we've got going out there. But that was where this was key to go through, because I find, you know, and again, you know, I've been for way too long. It's like 30 years this year that I've been doing this change thing. So, you know, the conversations that have gone on many times around, you know, it's great that you're doing all of those tasks, but you also need to think about what the people are experiencing along the way and engage them along that stuff. And then you need to build up, you know, do you have your purpose at the end goal? What is it you're striving to do? You know, and all those other elements that are maybe covered by some of the other principal pieces. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It's I often refer to it as being more like the circus performer who's spinning 20 plates at the same time to try and get all these things done, because we don't have the luxury of only having to spin one plate at a time when we're doing this change delivery stuff. So yeah, I hear you. Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, sure, go for it.
Hello, Rich. How are you? Let me
good.
just, I was hearing the Nicholas, I guess, talking about the tasks. One of the challenges I would like you just to share some ideas regarding your experience. Usually when I'm in the change process, I'm always struggling with 2 things: the quick wins, right? How much of quick wins do I need to put in my change process? And also how to predict, because I do a diagnosis in the beginning. Okay, this person or this process might give some more stress to the change process, but then they start to fall apart sometimes. How often do you manage the quick wins and the challenges in the road, so you keep the team together and with a good level of stress versus winnings? Do I make myself clear? Kind of, you know? So I'm always balancing that with the tasks itself. So I'd like you to share some ideas, if you can. How do you manage that in your experience?
Okay, so there's actually several questions all in that one question, I think. So I'll try and unpack each one of them and go through that.
Thank you.
On that piece. So so first of all, in terms of quick wins, I think, you know, I like the phrase and I like the term, but I often view a quick win as actually being more of a, what's a motivator that we need to, how do we keep the motivation, the engagement, you know, that sort of stuff, and kind of position it as that way as such. And then it's really about you understanding the audience you're working with. on the change. So for me, that's about what motivates that audience. What's going to need to happen? How often do they need to be motivated? So you've almost got to do that initial diagnosis of understanding your audience a lot more to find out what's going to motivate them. So for instance, some people want thank yous and well dones every week. Some people want never that said to them because they find it really not the words they want to hear, other things. Some people are like, show me the hard cash. That's what I want to see. That's how I get most. So you need to know that audience. And then you have to match that audience's expectation and need to what you can actually offer, because there may not be an exact match. Often there isn't. And then you find some space that provides what they expect based on what you can offer, as close a match as you can. And that means that when you're dealing with an audience, some of those people, some of those groups may need to have quick wins happening every 2 weeks. Other groups may need something once a month, once every 6 weeks. You have to be almost managing that stuff. There's unfortunately not one set rule that you can go out to, because people are different and people are motivated in different ways.
I just loved that you use the word audience, and I never thought a quick win in terms of a message, not only as an outcome, but also as a message. So thank you for that. I'm really thinking about this. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really key thing. And then I think, unfortunately, we never said change was easy. It does mean that there's a lot of record keeping for who you're doing what to, when, and how, and so that you can keep that piece. And that's what would be important as well to have in this, is some sort of, record keeping or self-checking mechanism. Because it may not be you always doing that motivation moment. It may be somebody else doing it. So you don't want to come in 2 days after somebody else has done something and they go, yeah, we've heard this. We don't want it again. Or we know this, or we shared this sort of stuff. And then the other thing I'd just add on to that piece is, don't just think of deliverables. Sure. I mentioned about the messages and you picked up on that stuff, but you can also think about that learning opportunities and education. That can also be a quick win for people in terms of when they understand what's going on, when they're educated, when they know things, and bringing that in at regular times so that you're nudging their understanding of the change along the way. That can also be a really helpful piece.
Yeah, I have great feedback when I offer a good experience in their portfolio or their career, or something, a capability they've never done before, so they can experience on their hand for the first time. It's also a very good quick win for me sometimes. So yeah, I agree with you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Who else has got some question? I think Oliver, you sent me a note, Oliver. Yeah. So do you want to share something, or maybe you want to share something offline? Maybe it's one of those questions. More than happy as well.
Listen, I'm senior. I'm a senior guy, and I was in your place sometimes 20 or 30 years ago. And it sounds to me that it is more or less the same that we did in those times, but with a new way of telling the things. Because, for example, in a certain time of my career, I was working for a large group of companies in South America. And I present my candidature to whatever, any place. And I was contracted that day. And 3 months later, they offer me a new position, upper position. You want to be district manager or you want to be training manager? I said, I want to be training manager. Why? Because I want to build my team. And we made changes of losing $5 million yearly. 3 years later, we were earning $5 million. And it was that, motivating the people. When you say, for example, leadership is a behavior, I'm hundred and thousands of millions of times agree with you. A leadership is not a guy who is behind in his desk, in his chair, you know, I'm the best, I'm the one. No, forget it. It doesn't work.
No.
You have to be in front of your guys. You have to say, in a certain time, there is an emergency, there is something that you have to be there, the first one, and organizing and guiding, giving guidances, calming the people, focus. I don't know if I'm wrong, but for me it's natural. The 10 commandments are perfectly 30 years or 40 years ago, it was exactly. So what kind of organizations today do this? I don't see it. Every day you see the positions for middle staff, middle organization staff, compare with the benefit that we have in 30 years ago is less than that.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of comment you can tell me? I'm wrong and you're fool, or you know.
far from it. No, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think that's it's actually the thing that makes me both sad and angry in a way. And I don't mean it angry in a bad, you know, but that sort of frustrated way, is that why are we still having these conversations? Why is nobody getting this is the way? Because, you know, as I said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I was saying the same thing 25 years ago as I'm saying now. And there are pockets that we're tapping into. And actually, I would say that I find the newer organizations, and by newer, I mean an organization that's only been set up maybe 10, 15 years ago, are much more willing to do this than the older traditional, we've been here for 100 and years, you know, all this sort of stuff, and it's never broken, so why do we need to fix it? So I have this conflict going on sometimes in that. And sometimes you have to accept that you can move some people, but only if they want to be moved. And some of those older organizations and companies maybe have to be allowed to stay in their place until they die, maybe. And that's where, although I would love to change the world with all of these things, I have to pick the right people to change the world with, I think, and encourage the right people who are willing to move this forward. And hopefully we can spread the word that way. That's my hope.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Anybody else have anything they wanted to share? I think my email has been put in the chat box. If anybody wants to reach out to me afterwards, more than happy to have a conversation, whatever. And if anybody's got any further questions, more than happy to do this. But any more for any more? No. This is where I use my 5 seconds of silence rule. If I get countdown to 5 seconds in my head, I assume everybody's content and there's no questions. But what normally happens is I get to about 4 and then somebody pops up and goes, oh, I was thinking.
Rich, this is a never-ending subject.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We can be hours talking about this because, as you said, change don't come from no to yes like this. No, it's a process. You have to build it, and you have to work with not only people, but with mentality, with behavior, with cultures, with a lot of things. You have to you say, I have been working in 5 countries. Maybe you have worked in 5 countries, but you don't know the 5 countries culture. And you must know the culture. It's not the same to work in Dubai that work in South America. No, completely different. Or to work in Europe or work in Morocco, for example. Yeah, it's completely different. Absolutely. And you have to adapt your behavior and understand. So it would be nice if sometimes I don't know where you are, but I'm in Lisbon.
I'm in the world. That's my place. The world.
That's your place. Okay? If sometime you have the time to run away from your world and come to Lisbon, to Portugal, you will be more than welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, I think we're coming up close to the end of the hour. So final few seconds, if there's anything more. Otherwise, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody for being here. A huge thank you for those taking the time. We will be publishing this as a recording on our YouTube channel afterwards, so it should automatically go up there in the very near future. And of course, reach out to me if you've got any questions as well. More than happy to connect. You can check out the website for the full details of the manifesto that we talk about these 10 principles. And yeah, I'm always happy to engage in conversation at any point in time. So yes, Paula, it'll be available, but it'll be on the YouTube channel, so you can watch it on the YouTube channel there. So yeah, perfect. So if you missed a little bit at the beginning or anything like that, you can catch up those pieces at either side. Or maybe you can actually focus a bit more and pick up on the things you want to challenge me back on a bit more. That's also fun. All right, folks, thank you so much for taking the time out this Wednesday. I will wish you well, and happy Star Wars Day to those of you that are fans, because that's the whole important piece here. So thank you very much. Take care of yourself, be well, stay safe.